In this skill cap guide, you'll be learning exactly why your mouse movement sucks and how you can fix it. For example, check out this player looking to land a Nami bubble. Pay attention to their mouse. Do you know what caused them to miss? They're aiming their mouse on Jinx's upper body. You should always be aiming at the center of the feet of enemy champions, as this is where the character's hitbox actually is. If you aim for the body or head, you'll often miss your skill shot when you think that you shouldn't have. So we got our SkillCapped.com subscribers to submit point of view footage of them playing in order to analyze exactly what they're doing wrong with their mouse. This was a massive project, and let me tell you, the results were shocking in that whether they were bronze, gold, or diamond, players were often making the exact same fatal flaws. And the first mistake we saw all players making is that they were spamming right clicks on enemy champions in teamfights. Watch this clip of a bronze Jinx. They're in a teamfight, turn on the enemy Xayah, and for 5 seconds straight they spam their right click on top of her. This is a big mistake, because between each auto attack or spell cast, you should be sending a movement command to make you both harder to hit, as well as chase down or kite more effectively. We'll get into this in more detail shortly. But I know what you're thinking, well, she's bronze, and I'm not. I don't do this, so it doesn't apply to me. Well, check out this silver player on Xin Zhao. Right after he engages, watch his mouse. He's spamming right clicks on the enemy champion, never moving in between auto attacks. Still too low elo for you to be convinced? Okay, how about this platinum player on Kayn? He spams his right click on the enemy Senna when chasing, and when she entered Wraith form, she became camouflage, and so he ended up just standing still awkwardly because of this mistake. The point is, most players are doing this at all ranks without even knowing that they're doing it. So what should you be doing instead? Well, you need to develop the habit of always, and I really do mean always, inputting a movement command after an attack command. You should never be standing still, just autoing, or only spamming the attack command when chasing or kiting. Why is this such a big problem? Well, firstly, you're going to be way less effective at kiting and chasing people down, which will result in lowering your damage per minute. For example, watch this bronze Tryndamere look to take the scuttle. He's only right-clicking on the scuttle instead of moving in between auto attacks. Here's a challenger player on Tryndamere with the exact same items and level, and by moving in between auto attacks, you're able to cover more distance and spend less time chasing and more time auto attacking, increasing your damage per second. So some players may already know this, but they don't understand exactly how this is possible. It's much simpler once you begin to understand how auto attack animations work in League of Legends. There's essentially two parts to your attack animation. The first is the wind up. You never want to move during this first part of the animation or you'll cancel the auto attack. Then there's the second part of the animation that occurs after your projectile releases or you damage something in melee form. By inputting a movement command immediately after this first half of the auto attack animation, you can actually cancel the second half of the animation. This is where you essentially save time and what lets you move more between auto attacks. By being able to move more while attacking the same amount of times, you can either kite better or chase down players better, effectively increasing your damage per second. For example, let's check out SkillCapped's Challenger Expert 6axe playing Sivir in a Smurf commentary on our website. The enemy team starts diving him, so he kites back, following that rhythm of swapping between an auto attack and a movement command over and over, never standing still. Most players understand this concept, but where they get stuck is when it's not clear if they should be cutting backwards or forwards. For example, jumping back to that Jinx clip, and you can see why she was spamming right click on the enemy Xayah. She wasn't sure whether she should be moving forward or backwards, so she just kind of stands there. When in this situation, you always want to be moving sideways in between auto attacks. The reason you want to do this is that it makes you much harder to hit with any projectiles. To jump back to our Challenger Expert 6axe, check out what he does in a similar situation when he's auto attacking the Set. He's at max auto attack range, so he doesn't need to kite back, he doesn't need to move forward since Set isn't running away, and so he defaults into side to side erratic movement. By the way, when we say that you should be doing this all the time, we really do mean all the time. Watch any challenger or pro player, even when they're auto-attacking minions in lane, and they follow this rule of moving in between each auto-attack. There's actually a really effective way to train this mechanic by jumping into the practice mode. Select an AD carry, and when you get into the game, make yourself level 18 and buy yourself attack speed boots and an attack speed item. The reason we do this is that having more attack speed and movement speed will generally make it a bit more forgiving and easier to practice. Disable minions from spawning and place a target dummy in mid lane. At first, you can start with simple drills. Try just walking forward, always following that pattern of one auto attack, then one movement command. Then you can try it backwards. Then try it to the left, and then to the right. Once you get the hang of the basics, you can place additional target dummies to move further and try more complicated patterns, such as for every 3 attacks forward, do 1 attack backwards. You can then challenge yourself even further by making a quicker pattern of 2 attacks forward and 1 back. You can then swap between them to again increase the difficulty. This is very similar to traditional training techniques that a boxer might use to train their timing and rhythm of their punches and dodges. In short, you really should never be clicking more than once on an enemy champion. Develop the habit of auto-attacking once and then inputting a movement command and repeating that pattern in pretty much every situation. Moving on, the second mistake we noticed all players making is they consistently click way too far from their champion. Let me show you what I mean. Here's a silver player. I want you to pay attention to their mouse while they're moving in lane. At first, this probably doesn't seem like anything out of the ordinary or that they really aren't doing anything noticeably wrong. Now, here's a challenger player. Again, pay attention to their mouse. This time though, I want you to take note of how close they're clicking to their champion. They're always sending movement commands very close to their character. Great, with this knowledge in the back of your mind, let's go back to that silver player. It should be painfully obvious now what they're doing wrong. They send movement commands extremely far away from their champion compared to the challenger. So why is this such a big problem? Well, it severely lowers your reaction time. If I click far away from my champion to the left, and then suddenly need to dodge to the right, my mouse has to move across a lot more space. This extra distance it travels takes more time, it also increases issues of inaccuracy. Compare this to if I'm clicking very close to my champion. There's less distance for my mouse to travel if I need to suddenly change directions. This allows me to react and change directions faster, while also making me more accurate. A lot of players aren't even aware of this idea. When you're moving, try to visualize a small circle around your champion, about this big. After analyzing pros, rarely do they exceed past this circle. Keep your mouse within this circle when inputting movement commands. You only move your mouse past this circle in order to input attack commands, fire skill shots, or to pan your camera. And this perfectly transitions into our next mistake players make. They either click way too much or way too little. Here's a bronze Tryndamere. Watch his clicks and you'll notice two things. First, as you just learned, it's now painfully obvious he's clicking too far away from his champion. You're welcome, you'll never not be able to see that from now on. Secondly, his clicking frequency is far too low. He's simply not clicking enough times per second. Compare this to our challenger expert Evnus. Notice how many more clicks per second that he's going to input. So why is this important? Let's simplify it at first to really understand the concept. Let's say I have to move to my left and I'm only allowed 4 mouse clicks. Due to the game's auto-pathing, it makes my movement very smooth and I change directions only 3 times. This smoothness, combined with very few direction changes, makes you easy to predict and land skill shots on. Now compare this to if I'm allowed to click as many times as I want. It almost looks like I'm jittery and much harder to predict. Additionally, I'm inputting more clicks per second so I can quickly react and change directions. If you watch someone with a low amount of clicks in lane, not only are they easier to hit with skill shots, it's also just easier to read when they're trying to go aggressive or what direction they plan to move. Compare this to a challenger player and you'll notice it's very hard to get a read on them. They feel very jittery and it's hard to predict whether they're trying to go aggressive or what direction they want to move in. Now, before you get ahead of yourself and just start clicking like a madman, you can actually go too far in the other direction. To drive home this point, let's take a look at the pro player Chovy. He's considered to be one of the best players in the world when it comes to mouse movement. I want you to watch this insane play he makes in real time and see if you can keep up with his mouse. Alright, so you probably couldn't, and because of that you were thinking, wow, he must have just been clicking like crazy and making all kinds of insane flicks. However, it's when we slow down the footage do we see just how wrong that is. Watch his mouse right after he ults as Aurelia. First, he hovers over the melee minion to press Q. He then moves it to another minion to press Q, then over Karma to press Q. It's here he doesn't even send another command since his champion will automatically attack Karma once his Q finishes. Instead, he's already hovered his cursor over his next target set. In the meantime, his champion auto-attacks. After the auto-attack finishes, he then presses Q on the set. He then hovers to the next minion and presses Q. Even though it seemed like he would be clicking like crazy, in reality he only moved his mouse 5 times and in a very controlled, smooth fashion. Now let's compare this to a diamond player. Just like with Chovy, let's watch this clip first in real time. Alright, that wasn't amazing, but didn't exactly seem that bad either. Here, let's slow it down. Now, there's going to be some issues that you'll notice, like he's inputting movement commands far away from his champion, but that's not what we're going to be focusing on. Instead, let's freeze frame on when he's being inefficient with his mouse. Alright, his mouse is currently in the middle of nowhere for no apparent reason. Did you catch that? Let's rewind. His mouse just went beside him, but he didn't actually input a movement command. And he just did some insane windmill technique, drawing half a circle on his screen. Keep in mind, this is a diamond player, and to be honest, he had some of the better mechanics compared to the other diamond players that we reviewed. The point is, players are often like the Tryndamere, not clicking enough, and so they are slow and easy to read. Or they have decent clicking frequency, or maybe click too much given their accuracy, and they become highly inefficient with their movement to the point that they become inaccurate. Just to be clear, always value accuracy first, and then try to push yourself to click 10 to 20% more frequently. Once that frequency becomes the new normal for you, and you're just as accurate as before, then increase the frequency by 10 to 20% again. It's important to build good accuracy habits first, and then introduce a gradual increase in speed. That's the key to getting challenger level mouse movement. Alright, we really did save the best for last, as one of the worst mistakes players make has to do with how they pan their cameras while fighting. For example, let's take a look at the Silver Jinx. She's chasing down the enemy AD carry, but is unable to pan their camera up while also managing their attack moving forward. Suddenly, we've lost the Zai's health bar and don't know if we should flash auto to kill her. What a lot of lower elo players do is they use the center on champion command, default bound to spacebar, and it's kind of like a crutch for this issue. For example, here's a Diamond Sejuani. Watch how she doesn't once use her mouse to pan the camera during this fight. Instead, to prevent Wukong from getting out of vision, she holds spacebar to keep the camera centered on herself. This does seem harmless at first and possibly even like a good solution, and it can be in the right situation, however, it can also severely limit you. Here's a different Diamond player on Kog'Maw. A fight breaks out and they fall back on holding spacebar since they don't know how to pan their camera effectively with their mouse. We now can't see the enemy's health bars or how close our Riven is to engaging. We completely lack information. The fight continues while they hold spacebar. If we pause, we can barely see the enemy set above us. Meanwhile, half our screen is filled with the terrain below us, which contains no enemies or any valuable information. Freeze a little bit later, and suddenly a Pyke just pops into frame. If our camera was panned upward slightly, we could have seen him much earlier. And again, Jhin semi-disappears off frame and we can't see his health bar. So to understand what you should be doing, let's take a look at a little known pro player. You might have heard of him. His name's Faker. To start this clip, his entire camera is already panned below him. He's literally on the top of his screen and it gives him so much more information on what's happening in front of him. As he moves forward, he nudges his camera back slightly so he can see his flank a bit better to his right. His team is winning the fight, the enemy is kiting away, so he then pans his camera with his mouse a bit more forward as he chases. Now he's being turned on. You can see he nudges his camera up a bit since he knows he's probably going to have to kite back and so needs to see a bit more behind him. As he kites back, he continues to nudge his camera back slightly. This is allowing him to have his camera still lean a bit more to the left where the enemies are to get maximum information. Just watch how the enemy Galio starts to disappear below our camera. Faker immediately nudges the camera down to get a better view. Then, as soon as they turn the fight back onto the enemy, he starts nudging his camera in the direction he's moving, always keeping the camera slightly ahead of his champion. This is how the best players teamfight so well. They're able to see the maximum amount of information on what the enemy team is doing by panning their camera manually the majority of the time. So what does all this mean for you? Well, as we saw earlier in the low elo replays, you're probably holding spacebar way too often and not manually panning your camera enough. And what we found out is that a big reason for this is that most players actually don't know how to execute this mechanically. So remember earlier when we said, when inputting movement commands, you always want to click close to your champion? Well, panning your camera is the exception to this rule. To pan your camera properly, you want to do a quick nudge on the border of your screen. This will force you to send movement commands a bit further out than usual. This is totally normal. There's actually a great way to train this in practice mode. First, just try getting the hang of nudging your camera so that your champion is in view at the bottom of your screen. You can just hit spacebar to reset and keep training yourself to nudge your camera just enough in that sweet spot where your champion is at the edge of your screen. Now, if you are nudging the top of your screen and your champion repeatedly disappears below your camera, you may want to try decreasing camera move speed in your options. The inverse would be if you nudge the camera and it barely moves up at all, you may want to increase the camera move speed. You want to keep practicing this until you're able to consistently keep your champion near the border of your game. Once you can do this, practice moving to top lane from your base with manual mouse panning. Nudge your camera so your champion is at the bottom edge. Then move your mouse back to around the halfway point between the middle of your screen and the top edge. Spam right clicks until your champion gets close back to the center of your camera, and then you nudge the camera again and repeat this process. The key to this is never panning your camera so far that you lose your champion on the screen. Once you master this, you eventually want to be able to take on the most difficult exercise, which is to be able to move through the river. This will force you to pan your camera up, spam right click, then left, spam right click, and repeat. You then want to go back the other way down the river to practice panning your camera down. Nudge your camera down, send movement commands, then right, then movement commands, nudge down, movement commands, then right, then movement commands. Do your best to keep your clicks centered so that you're moving in a straight line through the river. It's really easy to cheat by nudging up, then clicking up, then left, and clicking left. You'll know you're doing it wrong since your character will be zigzagging. Also, don't try to go too fast here. Go slow at first, develop good habits and accuracy, and then build speed over time. Once you've built this up, it's your choice whether you want to hold spacebar once the enemy's getting close. Chovy, for example, is known for doing this, or just kind of let the camera stay where it is and do more manual panning like Faker. So here's what we learned today. First, never spam right clicks on enemy champions, so you should always be moving in between your auto attacks. Second, try to click close to your champion when moving. It makes you more accurate, gives you faster reaction times, and harder to hit. Third, you're probably not clicking frequently enough. However, don't take that too far and just click wildly. Have clear intent with your mouse movements, prioritize accuracy and consistency, and then push yourself to increase your clicking speed gradually over time. Lastly, train your mouse camera panning. You need to be able to manually pan your camera with your mouse if enemies are outside of your vision range, while also being able to move and attack simultaneously.
Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's kind of like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into ELO hell 629 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $4.99 a month if you're serious about improving.
Alright, that's going to do it for this one. We here at SkillCapped want to thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.